Legislators are nearing a deal to extend the payroll tax cut holiday, jobless benefits, and the Medicare reimbursement rate. Funding for unemployment insurance and the Medicare sustainable growth rate would be offset, and the payroll tax cut holiday would be extended without cuts to the budget. We're going now live to the House.
Yeas and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Recorded votes on postponed questions will be taken after 6:30 p.m. today. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2079.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2079, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 10 Main Street in East Rockaway, New York, as the John J. Cook Post Office.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Kelly, and the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 2079, introduced by the gentlelady from New York, Ms. McCarthy, would designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at number 10 Main Street in East Rockaway, New York as the John J. Cook Post Office. The bill was introduced in June of this year and was favorably reported by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on November 3rd of last year. Mr. Speaker, John J. Cook served the community of East Rockaway, New York for more than 6 decades, working as a letter carrier at the facility to be named after him, serving his community for 60 years and 4 months. Mr. Cook went above and beyond to serve his neighbors and exemplified professionalism and courtesy each and every day on the job. Mr. Cook delivered mail on the same route for nearly all of his 60 years on the job, and according to many in his community, he continually touched the lives of countless people spanning many generations. According to one East Rockaway resident, he was, quite simply, the best. He knew all of his customers very well and gave personalized service throughout his career. The resident went on to say that, you know what, they just don't make people like him anymore. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Cook passed away in 2005 at the age of 78. He left behind his wife, Roberta, and many who will miss this true public servant and model postal employee. I urge all members to join me in naming the postal facility in East Rockaway, New York, after John J. Cook, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, I am pleased to join my colleagues in the consideration of H.R. 2079, a bill to designate the facility of the U.S. Postal Service located at 10 Main Street in East Rockaway, New York, as the John J. Cook Post Office. The measure before us was introduced by Representative Carolyn McCarthy on June 1, 2011. In accordance with the committee requirements, H.R. 2079 is co-sponsored by all members of the New York delegation. It was reported out of the committee by unanimous consent on November 3rd, 2011. And at this time, Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield to the gentlewoman from New York as much time as she may consume.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank certainly Mr. Kelly from Pennsylvania and Mr. Clay from Missouri for helping me get this through the committee, and I appreciate that. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Mr. John J. Cook, a World War II veteran, a model American postal worker, and an intricate member of the East Rockaway community. I also want to thank Senior Councilman Anthony Santoro for bringing this to my attention. Mr. Cook, a resident of my district, began working for the East Rockaway Post Office on January 8, 1944. For the next 60 years, he served our East Rockaway community as a letter carrier who exemplified the American work ethic, displaying professionalism, courtesy, and tireless dedication. After serving in World War II in the Pacific Theater, Mr. Cook began working for the local post office and quickly became an integral part of the East Rockaway community. Day in and day out, For more than 60 years, Mr. Cook took pride in his work delivering the mail to the East Rockaway community in a timely and efficient manner. He tailored his deliveries to the wishes of each individual customer. For example, he would make sure that important messages, such as a wedding invitation or college acceptance letters, were placed on the top of the day's mail for that customer. Mr. Cook would go above and beyond his expected duties. At times, he even would cancel his family vacations because the post office needed him for a last-minute shift. As public servants, we can recognize the importance of dedication, hard work, and service to one's community. It is only fitting and proper that the United States government and Postal Service take the opportunity to honor a great man like Mr. Cook. He truly was a great American. Mr. Cook exemplified these values on a daily basis and became an esteemed member of our East Rockaway community. He watched the children of his customers grow up and marry and have their own children. To rename the post office in Mr. Cook's honor will be a well-deserved tribute to a World War II veteran and a model public servant. And I hope my colleagues will join me in supporting H.R. 2079 in honor of Mr. John J. Cook. With that, I yield back my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Missouri reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no other speakers at the moment, and I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers and am ready to close, if that's okay with the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Having no additional speakers, I once again urge adoption of H.R. 2079. I also ask that we keep the example of Mr. Cook's career in mind as we work together to craft what should be bipartisan legislation to ensure that the institution Mr. Cook loved so much, the United States Postal Service, can continue to serve our nation so well. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to support the passage of H.R. 2079, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2079? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection,
Mr. Speaker?
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays have been requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. Sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3247.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3247, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 1100 Town and Country Commons in Chesterfield, Missouri, as the Lance Corporal Matthew P. Pathanos Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Kelly, and the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, will each control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 3247, introduced by the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Aiken, would designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 1100 Town and Country Commons in Chesterfield, Missouri, as the Lance Corporal Matthew P. Pathanos Post Office Building. The bill is co-sponsored by the entire Missouri State delegation and was reported favorably by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on November 3rd of last year. Mr. Speaker, it is fitting and proper that we name this post office in Chesterfield, Missouri, for Marine Lance Corporal Pathanos, a true American hero who gave his life courageously defending freedom. More than a selfless Marine, Mr. Speaker, Lance Corporal Pathanos was a loving son, brother, and friend. As one of his fellow Marines reflected after his tragic passing, the best thing about Matt was his ability to wake up every day with a smile and hold it all day long. Even while in the midst of war, Lance Corporal Pathanos strove to bring joy to his fellow Marines and friends. That's just the kind of guy that he was. And for his service and sacrifice, Mr. Speaker, we are truly grateful. I would now like to yield as much time as he may consume to my distinguished friend and colleague from the state of Missouri and the sponsor of this legislation, Mr. Aiken.
The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 3247, a bill I introduced to honor the life of Matthew P. Pathanos. I designated the post office in Chesterfield, Missouri as the Lance Corporal Matthew P. Pathanos Post Office Building. A resident of Baldwin, Missouri, Lance Corporal Matthew Pathanos was part of the 3rd Battalion, 24th Marine Regiment, 4th Marine Division of the Marine Forces Reserve. On February 7, 2007, Lance Corporal Pathanos was killed during combat operations in the Anbar province of Iraq. Matthew was often described by family and friends as a friendly young man who always had a joke to tell and a smile on his face. Matthew decided to go join the military in order to follow his older brother into his country's service with the hope of helping those who could not help themselves. Matthew's then-girlfriend, Iran, calls Lance Corporal Pathanos her hero and wishes she might one day possess a fraction of his bravery and discipline. As the father of 3 Marines, one of whom has served in Iraq, it is a privilege to stand here today to honor one of our fallen Marines. Matthew's commitment and dedication to his country is a shining example of how our military men and women are the finest our nation has to offer. His and his family's sacrifice should serve as a reminder to all that the freedom we enjoy in America is not free, but the result of the tremendous bravery and selfless service of men and women willing to put themselves in harm's way for freedom's cause. Our nation will be forever indebted to Lance Corporal Matthew Pathanos. Mr. Speaker, I ask that my colleagues join me today in honoring Lance Corporal Matthew Pathanos. Vote yes on H.R. 3247. Thank you. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves the balance of his time.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
And the gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as a member of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, I join my colleagues from my home state of Missouri in strong support of H.R. 3247, and I thank my colleague, Mr. Aiken, for introducing this legislation. And the legislation will name the postal facility in Town and Country Commons in Chesterfield, Missouri, after Lance Corporal Matthew P. Pathanos. H.R. 3247 was introduced by my colleague, Representative Aiken, and has the support of the entire Missouri delegation, including myself. The bill was introduced on October 24th of last year and was considered by and reported from the Oversight Committee by voice vote shortly thereafter on November 3rd, 2011. Tragically, on February the 7th, 2007, Lance Corporal Pathanos was killed while conducting combat operations in the Al-Anbar province, Iraq. Described as a disciplined, dedicated, and patriotic gentleman, Corporal Pathanos served his country proudly. In recognition of his dedication to his country, Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in commemorating the life of this brave Marine by supporting the passage of H.R. 3247, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I have no other speakers at the moment, and I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, having no additional speakers, I once again urge adoption of H.R. 3247 in honor of the life and service of Lance Corporal Matthew P. Pathanos, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I am truly grateful for the brave and heroic service of Lance Corporal Pathanos and for all those who serve and defend our nation each and every day. I urge all members to join me in strong support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3247? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider.
Mr. Speaker,
gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3248.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3248, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 112 South 5th Street in St. Charles, Missouri as the Lance Corporal Drew W. Weaver Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Kelly, and the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, each control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 3248, introduced by the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Aiken, would designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 112 South 5th Street in St. Charles, Missouri as the Lance Corporal Drew W. Weaver Post Office Building. This bill is co-sponsored by the entire Missouri State delegation and was reported favorably by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on November 3rd of last year. Mr. Speaker, it is altogether fitting and proper that we name this post office in St. Charles for Marine Corps Lance Corporal Weaver, a selfless patriot who made the ultimate sacrifice in Iraq at just 20 years of age. Remembered by many for his tenacious spirit, the ability to find a positive in every situation, Mr. Speaker, for being a true hero. Mr. Speaker, I could not agree more. Lance Corporal Weaver and all our brave and courageous fighting men and women are true heroes. And I'm thankful to have this opportunity to stand before this chamber and express my sincere gratitude for all that our service members do and all that they sacrifice each and every day. I would now like to yield as much time as he may consume to my distinguished colleague and friend from the state of Missouri, the sponsor of this legislation, Mr. Aiken.
The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 3248, a bill I introduced to honor the life of Drew W. Weaver by designating the post office in St. Charles, Missouri as the Lance Corporal Drew W. Weaver Post Office Building. A resident of St. Charles, Missouri, Lance Corporal Drew W. Weaver was part of the 3rd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, 1st Marine Division, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. On February 21, 2007, Lance Corporal Weaver died while conducting combat operations in the Al-Anbar province of Iraq. As Captain Mark C. Brown noted, Drew was known for his enthusiasm and his ability to motivate the people around him. Drew's contribution to his country was honored by his community when hundreds of people showed up to his memorial service and procession. A graduate of St. Charles West High School, friends and family of Drew remember him as an energetic young man who was eager to serve his country. Ryan Hansen, his best friend and a fellow serviceman, said, "Drew loved what he was doing and was proud of what he was doing in the Marine Corps." As the father of 3 Marines, one of whom has served in Iraq, it is a privilege to stand here today to honor one of our fallen Marines. Drew's commitment and dedication to his country is a shining example of how our military men and women are the finest the nation has to offer. His and his family's sacrifice should serve as a reminder to all of us that the freedom we enjoy as Americans is not free, but the result of tremendous bravery and selfless service of men and women willing to put themselves in harm's way for freedom's cause. As Reverend James Bentz noted during Drew's funeral, I think we can learn from them that the freedom we enjoy in this country is precious, that it is special, and that it must be preserved sometimes at great personal cost. Our nation will be forever indebted to Lance Corporal Drew Weaver. Mr. Speaker, I ask that my colleagues join me today in honoring Lance Corporal Drew Weaver. Vote yes on H.R. 3248. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as a member of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, I am pleased to join my colleagues in the consideration of H.R. 3248, which designates the facility of the U.S. Postal Service located at 112 South 5th Street in St. Charles, Missouri as the Lance Corporal Drew W. Weaver Post Office Building. This legislation was introduced in October of 2011 by my colleague and friend, Representative Todd Akin of Missouri, and considered and reported out of the committee by a voice vote on November 3, 2011. Additionally, along with all of my fellow members of the Missouri delegation, we are proud to be co-sponsors of this bill. And as was mentioned, Weaver was a native of St. Charles, Missouri, who bravely served with the 3rd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, 1st Marine Division, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force out of 29 Palms, California. On February 21, 2008, the young Marine was killed in action in Al-Anbar province, Iraq, while conducting combat operations in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Mr. Speaker, Lance Corporal Drew Weaver's life and service stand as a testament to the strength and support of his devoted family. He is a fine example of the bravery and dedication of the young men and women that have joined him in serving this nation and making the ultimate sacrifice. His devotion to duty was in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Marine Corps. It is my hope that we can honor this outstanding Marine through the passage of this legislation and without objection. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the passage of H.R. 3248, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no other speakers at this time, and I can continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, having no additional speakers, I once again urge adoption of H.R. 3248 in honor of Lance Corporal Drew Weaver, who gave his life in service to our country. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I'm truly grateful for the brave and heroic service of Lance Corporal Weaver. Let us not forget the ultimate sacrifice that he and so many other young Americans have made, promoting freedom and protecting our great nation. And I urge all members of this House to join me in strong support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3248? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules.
Mr. Speaker,
the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I would ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.
Okay.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
The House is recessing until 6:30 p.m. Eastern, when they'll hold votes on measures debated this afternoon. There are reports that House and Senate negotiators are near an agreement on how to move the payroll tax cut bill forward. We'll